up in motorcades. I got a show today, hustle and motivate. Got my name on the nose. No, you always going out your way. You always dropping off your flag. I feel like I'm cooped up. Okay, now girl, why you playing like that? Always trying to act like a brat. And they line as I walk. Come to my table, rest here in my garden. You will have a part.
All right, so we shall go ahead and get started. I think, let me get my life together real quick. Boom, boom. A little better. Close all them windows. All right, hello everyone. I am Lee with DevU, and today, on this day, we are going to talk about data types and variables. So this is the very beginning of our C# class. So that's where we start off, data types and variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to define what a variable is. We're going to talk about some of the commonly used data types. Then we're going to declare a variable and initialize a variable. Also, we're going to find out what those things really mean. So declare and initialize. So for people who are completely new to programming, those are probably uncommon words to you. So we want to get you more familiar with those, because one big part of learning programming is starting to pick up the language, understanding the lingo that's spoken, across, software developers everywhere. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to share one of my screens. I guess this one is fine. All right, so again, just to reiterate, we're doing data types and variables, and we are going to talk about the commonly used variables, the commonly used data types, then jump right into declaring and initializing variables. In almost any language, Python, C#, Java, we use variables to store and reuse information. It makes your code easier to read, easier to understand, and easier to maintain. It also makes it easier to scale or grow. A variable allows us to keep something in memory. So imagine every time you had to refer to your brother, you'd have to say, that person that came from my mother's womb, that is a male and is this age or was born at this time. Like, that's a whole lot to say when you could just call your brother by his name. L. Yeah, that's L. Hey, L, can you come get that for me? Hey, L, can you help me out with this? Hey, L, you want me to help you out with something? And anytime you reference your brother, or for me, anytime I reference my brother, I don't say, hey, person that came from my mother's womb, that is a male and is this age or was born at this time. You just call them by name. Hey, L. You just have a reference around that person. And it makes it easier for the just common everyday language use. Now, you have to remember his name. You have to store that in your own memory. Like, this person is L. Okay. Store it, lock it in your memory, kind of holds in some memory box of yours. It has the person picture and the person's name. That's L. You associate this person, that name. That's what we have variables for. It holds a certain piece of information so that we can reference it by name instead of having to always reference it or kind of recreate something in our memory to reference this person by. And that's it. Like, it makes life easier. Like, it makes language easier. And it makes life easier to read. It makes life easier to understand, and makes life easier to maintain, I guess. So jumping back to what we have in this first statement around variables. So we say that variables are used to store and reuse information. When we talk about this information, getting started, we're going to focus on a specific type of information. Data type is just a type of information. So it's different type of information that you can save. You can save numbers, you can save characters, you can save true false values, you can save, uh, I think that's pretty the baseline of the things that you can save. You have numbers, characters, true false values. And then you also have strings. Now the strings, I say that one last because strings is just a bunch of characters lined up. These are the commonly used data types, the ones that you'll see most in code, the ones that we're going to lean towards most throughout our course. Now, if you want more information on like some specifics and other primitive data types, we can have those sessions later on. But this is about where we need to start. So strings, a string is words, letters, or characters. So it can be full sentences, it can be a word, it can be a single character, it can be a special character like an exclamation mark or a question mark or a comma, or it can be like I said, full sentences or words. Anything that you can type into a document will be a character. Now, a character is just a single character. So it's just one character. It can't be a word, can't be two characters. It just have to correlate to one character. So one thing that you can type into a computer. And sometimes they can be represented by multiple characters, but that's another story. We'll get to that later in life. But it's just, for now, know that it's just one character. One thing to know, the difference between a string and a character, when you're creating a string, you use double quotes. And when you're creating a character, you use single quotes. Good way to remember that is, since a character is a single character, has single quotes. Leave that nugget with you. So next we have Boolean. Strange sounding word when you're first hearing it, but a Boolean is just a true or false value. So it can only be true, false, or null. Nope, it can only be true or false. So next we have integer. An integer, just like in math, it's a positive or a negative whole number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Negative integers, so you got negative 1, 2, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, all the way down to negative, like, I don't know, 1.6 million or something like that. Next up, we have a double. A double is a negative, it's all negative and positive real numbers. So this one can have a decimal point. So it can be 1.235, negative 7.639. And then again, it has a certain range that's very large. I don't remember exactly what it is, but with a quick Google search, you can find out if you're very interested. Sweet. So these are common data types, the ones that we'll use most in most of our code. So next thing we said we're going to do. So we defined variables, or we talked about variables that are commonly used data types. Now we're going to quickly discuss declaring variables, and this one I come with a little code example. I might get you a little code example up in there too. Okay. So declaring a variable. So when you declare a variable, you're pretty much just speaking it into existence, or you're kind of going back to that whole memory thing. You're holding a space in memory to hold some information. When you declare a variable, going to my definition. When you declare a variable, you're creating a space in memory for a new variable and naming the new variable. So you're creating that space in memory, and then you're giving it a name. So you don't necessarily have to give it some value, or you don't have to give it a soul or life yet, but you're just saying, hey, I need to hold on to this space in memory for this thing, and you name it. And then you can go ahead and initialize it later. So let me give you an example of what that looks like in actual code. So we're going to jump into our IDE here. So we're going to start a new project. And what's this? Visual Studio 2019. We're going to start a new project. And we're going to call it data types. Oh, no space. And variables. I'm going to just do var. And it'll be a console app. I don't want a .NET Core. I don't need a .NET Core. Okay. Nope, not a Windows 4. This is my regular console app. There we go. So just a regular console, .NET Framework, C#, regular console app. What is it? Data types and variables. Data types and var. This is my location. Okay. And create. Okay. So this gets us our class and everything, all the fun jazz. So inside of our main method, so I'm inside of these curly braces here. I'm going to drop down, and I'm going to go ahead and declare. I'm going to declare 3 variables of different types. So I'm going to declare a string. Okay, so remember when we're declaring, we just have to call into existence or store that space in memory for a certain thing, and then we have to name it. So by me typing out string, this is me saying, hey, create a space in memory, create a space in my memory for a string. And then we name it. And I'm going to name it my string. And you can name it whatever you like. And then I'm going to put a semicolon at the end, because in C#, the semicolon is like a period. You put a semicolon at the end of every sentence, and you'll hear me say that a lot. All right, so this is me declaring a string. Say, hey, I need a space in memory for a string, and call it my string. That's it. We just declared our first variable here. So next, we want to do the same for an integer. So I'll do int, and that's the C# of denoting an integer. It's just int, and I'll call it my int, and then again semicolon. So this is saying, hey, store a place in memory for an integer, and then call it my int. Now I am going to do a double, my double. Now you go ahead and do a character. That should have been enough time to do it, because it's, I guess if you know that character is just char, I guess. But if you didn't, now you know. So you do char or char, my character. All right, so we just actually declared 4 variables. Sweet. Beautiful. Excellent. Now notice in our code, we don't see any red squiggly lines, and I'm gonna tell you, that is a good thing. That's what we're going for. You don't want any squiggly lines. That's your measure of success. How many squiggly lines you have? So we're going to move on to our next concept, which is initializing our variables. So when we initialize a variable, so what we're doing is we're giving it a value. We're giving that variable some life. We're giving it some information to keep in it. So we have this space in memory for some information. We have a name for it, but now we just have to insert some information in it. So when you initialize a variable, you are simply giving your variable a value. The way we do that in most coding languages, we just set it equal to it with a single equal sign using the name. So for the variables that we have, we can have, like for my int, we can set it equal to 7. My double, remember a double can have a decimal point, so we can set it equal to 7.5. A string, remember the string has double quotes, and that's what I was referring to when I said a string has double quotes. So when you set that value for a string, you have to make sure that you have your double quotes. And this is how we know that the information we're putting in here is a string. You don't have to do that for integers, and you don't have to do that for Boolean. You don't have to do it for doubles or any number for that matter. Unless you want to store that number as a string. Different thing though. So for here, we have my string, double quotes, 7, my Boolean equals true. So let's jump into our IDE and give it a whirl. So here we have our variables. And then down here, I am going to set those values for these variables. So I have my string. And notice, like once you start typing, it'll pick up that you already have variables named this. So we can go ahead and just hit enter and it'll fill that right in for you. So my string equals, let's say, this is a string. Then my int equals 10. And then I'll do my character just so you can see the single quotes equals, I'll do the hashtag or a pound sign, whatever people want to call it. All right, so here we just initialize 3 of our variables. Now, real quick, I did this twice and I didn't explain it. So this here is just commenting out a line here. So when we can use comments right in our text editor or right in this space. And that's if we want to write notes or put information that we don't necessarily want the code to run over, or we don't want to compile, or code that we don't want used in our program. You would put 2, backslashes before any like notes that you want to put in the code. So if I was to remove those, notice we start getting some red squiggly, which is a bad thing. And that's because like these aren't, this isn't code, and Visual Studio understand that isn't coding language that we're talking there. So it's like, hey, what's this? Get this out of here. But if you want to put notes in there, you can do so by putting in 2 backslashes. And that'll pretty much cover the entire line. So I could write on this whole line a bunch of gibberish and it doesn't affect my code. All right. Don't want that there because you want to be succinct with your notes. All right, so here we declare 4 variables. We initialize 3 variables. Notice another thing, you can only initialize a variable if you declare it first. So I couldn't just go in here and say, let's say my Boolean equals true. So immediately it says Oh, another thing is when you hover over a word or the red squiggly, um, it'll often give you a suggestion on what's wrong. It'll give you more information about the error that you're seeing or what's wrong. So it says the name my Boolean does not exist in the current context. Pretty much saying, hey, I don't know what a Boolean is. What is this? Now, another great thing is, see this here? Show potential fixes. Oh man, I probably should enlarge my font here. Let's do that. I'm sure that's better. We can probably go cling 200. Yeah. Okay, so you see here when you hover over it, it says the name Boolean does not exist in the current context. When you click on this show potential fixes, these pop up and say generate a field, generate a property, generate local Boolean, generate, change my Boolean to this Boolean. So it gives you different suggestions. And like you need to know a little bit of what's going on to choose the right suggestion, but a lot of times it can be helpful with your overall flow. For me, I know that I want to do this because like it looks like, but for us for now, it looks familiar. Like we have bool, my Boolean equals true. Like this bool, my Boolean, that looks familiar. Like this don't look familiar. What's all that? I don't know what that is. Like what's all that going on there? I don't know what's all that there. Oh, wait a second. This kind of look familiar. We got Boolean, my Boolean equals true, Boolean equals true. No, that ain't it. That ain't what I want. So once you kind of get into coding a bit, you'll start to understand what some of the suggestions are, and you'll have more information on whether a suggestion is right for what you need for the moment. So for now, let's go ahead and declare this my Boolean and see if we can get rid of this squiggly. I guess I'll change this to 5 variables. You don't have to change that to 5 because again, that code up there is commented out. I'm just kind of want to stay consistent. So remember Boolean is bool, and that's storing a space in memory for a Boolean. And I'm going to name it my Boolean. And then immediately it gotten rid of the red squiggly here. Notice it's asking, it got a squiggly here, and that's because we didn't put a period on the end of our sentence, or a semicolon at the end of our line. So here, so we initialize 4 variables, declare 5 variables, and I'm going to cover one more thing in this video, or I'll cover 2 more. I'll do like one main thing, then the last quick run through or something. So now we just went over declaring and initializing a variable in 2 steps. 1, we declare it. 2, we initialize it. Now we do have an ability to declare and initialize in 1 step, and different reasons cause for different solutions. So it's good to know both ways. For us, for now, it's probably easiest to do a lot of these in the 1 step. So to do it in 1 step, you'll say the type. Again, by saying that type, we're creating that space in memory to hold our variable. Then we give it a name, putting a name on it, and then we putting a value in it. So we do type name equals value. So it's pretty much taking that first step, type name, period, and then taking that second step, name value, period, and just kind of merging those together. So we have type name equals value. So let's jump into our code and see what that looks like here. So one thing I'm gonna say is, as we're doing these, when we create a space of memory and name something, we can't have two things with the same name in the same scope of code. So just keep that in mind as you're declaring and initializing new variables. So I'm gonna show you what happens when we do, just so we can see it. So if we wanted a string, my string equals my new string. Now, we get our red squiggly. That's always a bad sign. So here we go here, let me see. A local variable or function name, my string, is already defined in the scope. The variable my string is assigned, but its value is never used. Oh, so that's a whole different conversation. But the main thing that it's saying is, hey, variable or function name my string is already defined. You already have a my string in our space here. Like we ain't got room for two. This class ain't big enough for the both of them. So here it's just saying that, hey, you got to rename this. My string already exists. So as easy as just changing that to my string 2, changing it completely to new string. So however you want to do it, as long as it's not something that already is named in this scope. All right, so we have our new string. And we did that in a one step. So declare and initialize. And then, in one step. All right, sweet. And let's do another one. Int other int equals 14. Let's do a Boolean. Oh no, we got a Boolean. Char. Double equals. Oh. Second double equals 2.2. All right, sweet. So now we have our code, no red squigglies. So that's, again, always a good sign. Next thing we're going to do with this is we're going to write it to the console, and then we'll just to see it in action, you know. So recall when we first started writing code, the first thing we did was a hello world. And then you start for the folks who's in our C# class that's going on right now. If you're not familiar with our C# class, visit devu.org, get some more information about it, and potentially jump in. They're virtual right now. They're free right now, so jump on in whenever. Well, not whenever, I guess, because we might be in the middle of one. Look us up and see when the next one starts. And I do encourage people to start even if we already got started, because there's ways to get people up to speed. So we'll do a console write line. And I am going to say, so remember we did this, hello world. So we do. So remember we put this console read line so that our console don't just print hello world and then disappear. So we want to keep it up there long enough for us to read it. So we put this read line. just so the console can stay open. So I'm gonna go up here to our start button and we're gonna run our code. Okay, so my console came up on my screen. So here we have hello world. Cool. So now, instead of saying hello world, I'm gonna place one of my string variables in there. So let's just put in new string. So we type in new string. Now let's run that. Okay, so here it prints to our console, my new string. Yep, so recall a variable stores information so that we can reuse it. So let's store the information. Let's store this information here so we can reuse it. Now I can reuse it as many times as I want without having to write this whole thing out again and again and again. I mean, I know that for this example, there's no real reason we want to print the same line 3 times in a row. But if there were, we now have that ability to do it very quickly and very easily without doing a bunch of typing. Just a small example of how variables can be used for scaling and reusability. So we have my new string, my new string, my new string. All right. So I'm gonna cover one more thing before we get up out of here. Now, say we're gonna do a read line. So say we want to get, so in our class, we're gonna be making a few console applications. So in our console applications, we will allow the user to input values into the console and we will store that information in a variable. So we're storing user input in a variable. So this will kind of jump into some of our homework for this class. So I just wanted to do a quick one on this one. So it's gonna be real quick. So we'll start right here, I guess. So we use this console.read line, but before we can use that console.read line, we have to create us a space in memory and name our variable that we want to keep this user input. So so we want a string. So when we use this read line method, this is what we call it. When we use this read line method, it will take in a string. So it's expecting the user to input a string. So I'll call it user input. And then instead of setting it equal to something in quotes or in the double quotes, I'm going to set it equal to console.read line. Okay. So this is going to allow the user to type that information right into the console, and then I want it to write that line to the console on this third write line. And that's just so you can see it, so you can differentiate between what you wrote and the code actually running properly. And just so you can see it. So we're going to put in our variable user input. And we're going to run our code. Okay, so right now you see this blinking, I guess, underscore type deal there. So it's waiting for some user input. So I'm going to say, this is the user speaking. Hit enter. And we have the new, or my new string, and then it prints, this is the user speaking. So if we was to pair that up with our code, so this is where we wrote it with our read line method here. So then here, it writes new line for new string, writes line for new string, and then it writes line for user input. And now we're back on a read line. And again, this last read line is just so the console don't disappear on us. And what I mean by that, I can show you better than I can tell you. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm gonna get rid of this line. Start my code. Oh shoot, it's gonna happen on the other screen. I won't even be able to drag it up. Maybe I will. Oh yeah, because I'm printing. I'm writing in the screen, so it will. Okay, this is user input. So it ran through it real quickly and it disappeared. So that's why we put that last read line, just so we can keep that up there. All right, so for now, that concludes I think I'm gonna say that concludes our lesson for today. For the most part, I might do one more thing though. Debate. I guess it would be helpful if I did one more thing. All right, I'm gonna do one more thing. Okay. So, and this is again helpful for the homework for this week. So, figured why not? All right. So, say we wanted an integer from the user. User int. Now, I told you earlier that this read line method, it's only looking for a string. We know that because when we hover over the read line method, it gives us more information. And it says string here. We ain't got to this part yet, but this is letting us know that hey, this is looking for a string, or this is returning the string. So it's going to give us back a string once it runs. So if we want to store an int, we have to convert it. And notice the code is a little lengthy for us right now, but it ain't too difficult. So we have this convert class. So we'll do a convert, and then we'll have to tell it what we want it to convert to. Now it gives us a suggestion right off rip. Convert to integer, because it's looking at this and oh, maybe you want to convert to integer. And that is exactly what we want to do. Now, for this example, now you see we got int 32, 16, 32, 64. For most of the stuff that we're doing now, to conserve memory, we do it int 16. That's the smallest. That's the smallest integer that the smallest piece of memory for an integer. And real quick, what that means is we have 3 different types of integers that's available to us from here. We have int 16, then we have int 32, then we have int 64. and it's pretty much the size of the memory that we need to um, create to hold this variable. And like I said, integer has a certain range that it can be from like 0 to, or from like negative 1.6 million to positive 1.6 million. Like if you have an integer that you need larger than that, you'll have to use one of the larger spaces in memory, one of those larger integers. So the N16 may be 1.6 million to negative 1.6 million to 1.6 million. The N32 might be, I don't know, 5 million, negative 5 million to 5 million. Then the N3064 will be even larger numbers. So depending on the size of the number, and again, you can easy Google search to see what those exact numbers are if you're interested. So depending on the size of the numbers, you don't want to like hold this big space in memory for this little bitty number. So it's a waste. And we'll talk more about code efficiency later in life. But just something to have on your mind while you're doing some of this intro coding stuff. So anywho, we're doing this to int, and we'll do an int 16 because I'm not going to use a big number. And now we're going to do, oh no, not a convert. Console dot read line. I did that kind of messily. So when we do the read line, you're going to have your open and close parentheses, and look at that hint, semicolon expected. We need a period on the end of our sentence. All right. So now when this code runs, we'll just run through it out loud. It's going to declare all these variables. It's going to initialize these variables. It's going to declare and initialize our new string variable, and then these variables. And then we get into this read and writing part. So it's going to allow us to read a line from the console that we can type in. Then it's going to look for us to put in a number or an integer, and it's going to take that in and store it in this user int. And then let's print that number in between our new string and our user input. So what's this user int? So now we will see what writes to the console. Or first, we will write a line to the console, write another line to the console. Then we get a new string. Then it writes a new string. I know I said that in a very confusing manner. So first, we are going to write a line to the console, and it's going to read it. Then we're going to write an integer to the console. It's going to read it. Then it is going to write a line to the console. Then it'll write our integer to the console. Then it'll write our user input to the console. I think the code reads better than I can speak it. So we're going to start. Okay, so it's building. Okay, so now we have our console. My line 45. And then, so we can juxtapose that with our code. So we have this first string is what we wrote, which is user input. Get my video back on. Like I said, till next time. Thank you for stopping by. This is Dev U. Check us out. Holla at us. Join the class. Sign up. Go to devu.org. Follow us on Instagram. And learn code. Stay safe. Peace.
Make it easier for the world to change someday. Sometimes I contemplate some things my heart can't take. Why do we burn one another? Fight our pride, can't embrace. Love gets you beyond, but don't you see it all? You know, you just have to believe in who you are. Who can love?
Man, you can't play that.
Can I love when they tell me I can't love myself?
Ooh, can I love?
I possibly love someone else. Can I love when they tell me I can't love myself?